I heard the scream before the knock, that high, sharp sound that makes your stomach drop. And when I stepped onto my porch, the HOA chair of our neighborhood stood in my driveway, dripping electric blue, pointing at my gate and yelling chemical assault, while a patrol car idled at the curb, and I just held up my phone and told the officer, "Hit play, please, because cameras don't argue, and my system only mists when someone yanks the latch without the code." My name's Jonah Miles. I live with my wife Tess in Cedar Point Meadows, on the east side of Fairview. Quiet cul-de-sac, charcoal steel gate, to keep delivery folks from wandering into the side yard. Not a fortress, not a statement, just a gate that opens and closes and minds its business. Or it did until the 6 a.m. notice showed up taped to my mailbox with a fine and a sentence about how my industrial barrier violated the visual cohesion of our streetscape, which is a wild thing to read before coffee. 2 days later, there's a knock that sounds like a tax audit, and I meet our HOA chair, Marjorie Hale Crisp Visor, and a smile that could write you up without moving her lips, telling me the gate interrupts the aesthetic language of the block. And when I point at the same matte black gates on Sandpiper Lane, she taps her clipboard and says one word that ought to be printed on a warning label. Grandfathered meaning we like it when they did it, not when you do it. Replace it by month's end or face daily fines. She says, then leaves like a curtain falling. I did the reasonable thing. I read the bylaws. I walked the other side of the neighborhood counting identical gates, like I was on a scavenger hunt. I called a buddy who installs low-voltage systems, and buried in the rules was a line about posting warnings for automated deterrence. Nothing about marking unauthorized entries with non-toxic dye. Nothing that says you can't protect a boundary, as long as you tell folks where the boundary is. So I posted 3 red signs. Private property, automated security, do not open, and installed a small canister that only mists if the latch is pulled without disarming the same kind of harmless biodegradable dye farmers use to mark trespass in orchards, hoses off hair. No big drama unless you make one. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for peace. But peace doesn't visit neighborhoods where someone falls in love with the sound of their own rules. So at the next HOA meeting, Marjorie gave a PowerPoint on visual storytelling and curb narratives, while I held photos of a dozen approved gates. The board nodded like garden gnomes and voted against me. And Tess squeezed my hand and whispered, "Choose your battles." And I whispered back, "I am." The morning of the scream was classic. Pacific Northwest wet light. The sun trying. And my doorbell cam pinged as Marjorie walked up with her phone out like she was live streaming heroism, narrating my non-compliance. Then she grabbed my latch, and the system did what it was designed to do. A fine blue mist marked the intruder, she shrieked, and dropped her phone and put both hands in her hair, like the die was personal. And I stepped out and said, "Come," like I practiced. You opened my locked gate. The system only triggers on manual tampering, and she jabbed a finger and called it assault. And I pointed up to the cameras and said non-toxic, biodegradable 4 angles, and she left a trail of blue shoe prints down my concrete, like accidental art. By lunch, the clip hopped from our street chat to the neighborhood Facebook page to a Reddit thread titled, "HOA Lady Gets Blue Justice." I didn't post it, I didn't send it, but you can't hold water in a colander, yeah? That happened by dinner. The HOA office called by dessert. Marjorie called same number. Threats, then demands. Then remove the video or be fined into next century. I let the voicemail stack while I emailed my insurance agent and the non-emergency line with a simple note. Marked trespasser signage, visible footage archived. And that was the day helplessness in my chest got replaced by something steadier. Not rage, just this pilot light of, I know what I saw, I know what I saved, and I can wait. She didn't come back with humility. She came back with paper. 2 men in orange vests and a temporary utilities inspection work order, stamped with our HOA name, spraying lines across my lawn, like it had sinned. And when I asked for the city permit, they shrugged and said the lady with the clipboard authorized it. So I explained calmly that without a permit, they were on private property. I called it in so there'd be a log, and they left with apologies. And I waved to Marjorie across the street while she studied her phone like it was going to clap for her. That night, an emergency privacy rule hit my inbox, demanding I disclose model and location of every exterior camera. Serial numbers included, which made me laugh out loud, and I replied happy to comply when the HOA removes its own communal surveillance and publishes the serials too. And while I waited for the silence that followed, my phone buzzed at 11:42 p.m. Motion alert live feed. Familiar silhouette in a hoodie crouched at my mailbox with a small flashlight tripping over the same landscaping rock every delivery driver trips over, whispering a word you won't find in the bylaws. So the next morning, I printed a still shot and taped it above the box with a note. Smile. Marjorie, you're trending. Tess said I was poking the bear, and she wasn't wrong. But sometimes a bear keeps stepping forward because nobody but Buru ever held the line. And that's the thing I kept telling myself in the mirror. Hold the line and don't move. Not everything had to be blue or explosive. So one Sunday, I swapped the dye for a chalk burst. Cornstarch confetti with food coloring. Legal, harmless, vacuumable. And while I was rinsing the truck, she wandered up again to inspect. Reached for the latch, and a blue and gold cloud popped, like someone threw a tiny parade. She sputtered and spit colored specks and shouted, "You think this is funny?" And I said, "I think it's festive." Mr. Delaney snorted into his iced tea, loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to declare a position. And by Tuesday, a petition to remove her from the compliance committee was circulating. I didn't start it, but I signed with a steady hand. The blue clip kept bouncing slow-motion edits, dramatic music. I'm blue. Remixes the internet doing what it does. And then a Channel 9 news van crept onto our street. Reporter already. Sorry in her eyes. Marjorie leading them up my driveway like she was unveiling a crime scene. And I walked the reporter through the 3 warning signs. The contractor receipt. The mailbox clip. The fake work order beside the city's email. Watched her polite smile fall off like a loose button. And she said, "We may need to reconsider our angle," while the cameraman coughed laughter into his sleeve. And Marjorie accused me of manipulating narratives, which is rich when your whole brand is a narrative, with fines attached. A few nights after that, my neighbor Janelle, queen of routers, saint of diagnostics, showed me someone was pounding my camera logins from the Clubhouse network, so we set a little tripwire, a pop-up that says, "Unauthorized access. Detected this IP has been flagged," and 30 seconds after it triggered. My phone rang, and Marjorie hissed, "You think you're clever?" And I asked why she was calling me at 10:45, and she said, "Stop hacking me." And I told her the logo she saw was a warning, not a warrant, and to go to bed. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to be the adult in the phone call, too. The twist came in an email from the HOA president, Tom Beckett, who hates drama almost as much as weeds, asking for any documentation of harassment or overreach because their audit committee had found irregularities tied to spending. So I did what the quiet kids do when they get pushed too far. I organized a folder labeled Timeline, Facts Only. The blue incident, the chalk burst, the midnight mailbox, the fake work order, the emergency camera email, the failed logins, the warning signs, the contractor receipt, and a plain envelope. I hadn't told you about yet, block letters. Enjoy your little win. You'll wish you hadn't scanned and filed, because the loudest thing in a feud isn't the scream. It's the silence that follows. Cedar Point loves a food truck and a raffle, so at the spring fair, they added an open forum near the tennis courts. And I didn't march, didn't grandstand. I just walked to the mic with a small USB and said I'd like to show a timeline, facts only. And when Marjorie tried to shut it down, Tom nodded at the projector and said, let him speak. And slide, one was boring on purpose. The 3 warning signs and the install receipt slide. 2 was the gate clip with a timestamp. Her hand, the mist. The blueprints on concrete. The room let out a sound that was half gasp, half relief light. 3 was the mailbox. Hoodie. Still slide 4. 4, the fake work order. Beside the city's no permit. Reply slide 5, the camera disclosure email. Next to the HOA's non-existent public camera list. Slide 6, the failed logins traced to the Clubhouse network. Slide 7, the block letter note. I let each slide breathe, just long enough to feel like proof instead of payback, and she shouted harassment and entrapment, and I kept my hands flat and said times, dates, signatures. That's all, and Tom leaned into his mic and said the audit also shows transfers from the maintenance fund to a consulting account tied to your signature. Would you like to address that? And the temperature in the room changed. And she said, I did what I had to do to maintain standards. And someone in the back whispered, standards aren't slush funds. And she snapped, the rules are me. I am the order here. And the live stream camera kept its little red light blinking, because that's what truth does. It just keeps recording until pride writes its own caption. Tom tapped his folder like a gavel, said the board had heard enough, effective immediately. She was removed from all HOA positions, and the matter referred to the city, and unilateral enforcement paused pending policy audit. And he thanked me for documentation, and I didn't bow or grin or add a line for the quote page. I just pulled the USB and put it in my pocket and walked home under that second kind of silence, the kind people didn't know they needed until it finally landed. People later asked if the die was a trap,